And now, Medea Benjamin.
A podium where you can go from Kevin Martin to me. So what an honor to be here tonight, and I think we're all feeling like we really need community tonight. When we were mulling about and talking to each other, people would say, "How are you?" And they'd say, "Oh, I'm great." "No, I'm terrible, I'm terrible." What Trump did today infuriated so many of us, absolutely infuriated. Took the best foreign policy achievement of the Obama administration and is trying to unravel that. And it is so dangerous, it is so reckless, it is so wrong. Luckily, we have an international community, the other signatories of the Iran nuclear deal that are saying, hello, we want to stick with this agreement. Luckily, so far, Iran is being calm about this. And luckily, we do have some people in Congress who have saner heads than the person in the White House and will hopefully stop Congress from passing some horrendous snapback sanctions that will empower the hardliners in Iran. But a day like today, we need each other. And a time like now, when Donald Trump is careening towards another potential catastrophic war in North Korea, where we see the buddy Donald Trump and the King of Saudi Arabia even closer together than under Obama in supporting the horrendous bombing campaign that is so devastating the poor people of Yemen. When we see President Trump giving more carte blanche to the military to kill more civilians overseas, to use more drone strikes, to send more troops to Afghanistan, we sure need each other, and we sure need peace action. And that's why it's so important to be together right now. You know, if I had said a year ago, there is nothing more important than supporting peace action, it would have sounded trite. Today, it is absolutely critical. And so I also think that while we are here remembering the great Martin Luther King and being in this church, this space where he gave that amazing speech, I also think that were Martin Luther King with us today, he would have added to the triplets. And we would have added to that the devastation of our climate, the crisis that we are going through right now. And he would have added to the triplets the need to fight patriarchy, especially at a time when we have the most sexist abuser, groper in the White House. But I am so honored to be able to introduce some of our honorees, and before I do that, it is quite interesting, Congresswoman Lee, that we also have another Congresswoman Lee who has recognized peace action today, and that is Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, who actually passed a resolution in Congress today in honor of peace action. I will read part of it because it's a wonderful resolution. It says, peace action originated with the National Committee for a Sane Nuclear Policy, better known as SANE. SANE was launched in 1957 by a group of prominent Americans headed by Norman Cousins and Clarence Pickett to focus on American opinion on the dangers of nuclear weapons testing. SANE quickly became the largest and most visible peace group in the United States. And in May 1960, SANE held an overflow rally, Madison Square Garden, with speeches by Eleanor Roosevelt and other luminaries. SANE and Freeze united in 1987, and in 1993 formed Peace Action, led by Reverend William Sloane Coffin Jr., which threw its efforts into halting U.S. nuclear weapon production, reducing military spending, cutting off funding for the US-backed wars in Central America, supporting sanctions against the apartheid regime in South Africa, mobilizing public support for a peace economy, backing the Middle East peace process, and helped steer legislation through Congress that terminated funding for underground US missile tests. Quite an amazing list of accomplishments. She goes on to say that peace action pressured the Obama administration to end wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, redirect bloated Pentagon spending to needed special programs, settle the US conflict with Iran through negotiations, and backed a just peace between Israel and Palestine. And she ends by saying, peace action continues its important work to build a safer, saner, and more peaceful world. And now we come to the other Congresswoman, Barbara Lee, who represents California's 13th Congressional District, is a senior member of the Appropriations and Budget Committee, former chair of the Progressive Black Caucus, co-chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, former co-chair, currently serves as vice chair of the Democratic Steering and Policy Committee, senior Democratic whip, co-chair of the Sudan and South Sudan Caucus. You might not know her for her other major issues, including criminal justice reform, gender equality, food security, public health, particularly HIV/AIDS. And we certainly know and love her for what she did on September 14th, 2001, right after the US was attacked. And when she was that lone voice, she said, "I knew it would be a blank check to wage war anywhere, anytime, for any length of time." I lived in the Bay Area at that time, and throughout the Bay Area there were signs that went up and buttons that we put on, and all of it was saying, "Barbara Lee speaks for me," and that went throughout the nation, where so many people felt this incredible gratitude to this one lone voice of reason, who since that time has continued to oppose that authorization for the use of military force, continue to try to find ways to say to Congress, either you go on record supporting these wars or you stop supporting these wars. So let's all say, as we bring Barbara Lee up, get on your feet and say, "Barbara Lee speaks for me. Barbara 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 Lee speaks for all of us." Thank you so much.
Medea, I thought I was at home for a minute. Thank you so much for that very inspirational introduction. But also, just thank you for your tremendous work. You know, sometimes in our committee hearings, they get pretty, negative, pretty right-wing, pretty depressing. Then I look out there, and who do I see in pink but Medea Benjamin? And it gives me the encouragement and the inspiration to keep fighting a good fight. So thank you. Give Medea a round of applause. And let me thank, of course, Reverend Butler, who's the senior pastor here at this great church, for opening this house of worship and for leading this church really in the spirit of Reverend William Sloan Kaufman, who I actually had the privilege to know and to work with. And tonight we're here to celebrate 60 years of Peace Action's leadership in the fight for peace and justice. Now, I became involved actually with Sane Freeze when I worked for a great warrior for peace and justice, Ron Dellums. This was in the day. I had the privilege to serve as Ron's chief of staff. And believe you me, I learned a lot and got so involved with Sane Freeze and then Peace Action that I have no option but to do what I do today in Congress. Let me also thank Sally Jones, who's chair of the Peace Action Fund. Really. Thank you for your leadership and tireless efforts for peace. This is a wonderful event tonight. And it's really befitting that the theme of tonight's gala is Peace Demands Action. Now, with all of the challenges that we face as a nation and a global community, we need principled men and women around the world to stand up, to speak out, and to take bold actions to promote peace. We need courageous women like our emcee, Medea, co-founder of CodePink and one of America's, and I say most effective fighters for civil and human rights. She really is. And I miss you at home, Medea. You gotta come back more. We need warrior women like LaDonna Bray Bull, who is receiving the William Sloan Kaufman Jr. Peacemaker Award tonight for her courageous fight to defend Standing Rock. Yes, we need women like LaDonna. And yes, we need men like Ben Cohen, who has used his resources to create a better world and who's really shaped in Congress our Congressional Progressive Caucus's military budget with expertise and clarity about defense spending. Ben, you're needed more than ever, and peace action is needed more than ever, really. And to the Hofstra University Peace Matters and to all of our young people, I tell you, in this age of alternative facts, we need young people, we need leaders, we need men and women who are determined to stand bold in their truth no matter the cost. Leaders like who we're honoring tonight, our dear friend Harry Belafonte. Tonight, Harry will receive Peace Action's Lifetime Achievement Award. And let me just say, there is no one more deserving of this award than Harry. He's an extraordinary man who has achieved extraordinary things. And I had the privilege to meet Harry again in the day, this was in the 70s, at his beautiful New York home. And it was at an event, and I think, Cora, you and Peter were there. It was at an event honoring the world-renowned Cuban group Los Papinas. And that was the first of many encounters where I had the privilege to work with Harry and to march with him and to be encouraged by his words of wisdom, passion, and love. He truly embodies also the essence of the resistance movement, which we all are part of and leading. And so just thank you for honoring Harry tonight, and thank you for celebrating him, because he is an extraordinary human being. Thank you. Now, 40 years ago, again, while working for our great statesman and warrior, Congressman Ron Dellums, I just have to share this with you. I spoke here at Riverside Church in his absence at a conference, and I was really nervous because here I was representing this great human being, this great statesman, speaking from Riverside with the African National Congress. Of course, then it was illegal to be with the African National Congress, they tell me, but I was right here with many of you at Riverside Church speaking with the ANC and on Ron's behalf. And it was really an honor and a privilege to speak from where our great Prince of Peace and Prophet Dr. King once stood. And I have to thank Kevin because I wanted to mention that speech very briefly when Dr. King made his call to action for peace in his historic speech, Beyond Vietnam, A Time to Break the Silence. Now, on that day in 1967, Dr. King challenged not only the administration in power, but made a case to leaders of the civil rights community that the time for silence on war was over. Now, 50 years later, the consequences of senseless war continues to plague our nation. 50 years later, our country remains steeped in the vicious cycle Dr. King called the triple evils in a speech later that year. And so as we applaud the champions among us this evening, my prayer really is that remember that peace does indeed demand action. We need to be inspired by their lives to do everything within our power to do more, to fight harder, and to never lose hope for a peaceful and more just world. A world without the evils of militarism, poverty, and racism, and patriarchy, and yes, a world where we are securing the planet for our children. The war in Afghanistan, 16 years old. The war in Iraq, 14 years old. That resolution I voted against, yeah, it was a blank check for endless war. And you know what? It's been used now over 37 times around the world in 14 countries, justifying military action throughout the world, as well as Guantanamo, as well as wiretapping here in our own country. And so earlier this year, we saw a glimmer of hope, thanks to you, when my bipartisan amendment to repeal this amendment was approved unanimously in the Appropriations Committee. Unanimously. Republicans and Democrats. Republicans and Democrats. Now, of course, Speaker Ryan ripped my amendment out in the dead of the night in an undemocratic and autocratic manner. But this was a small victory, and it showed us that we're on the pathway to get this blank check for endless war repealed. And thank you, Peace Action, for that. And yes, we're trying to restrict the president's ability to take a nuclear first strike by supporting H.R. 669. Please help us support that. No first strike. The president must come to Congress if he's even thinking about a nuclear strike. So please help us get co-sponsors on that bill. Dr. King also reminded us that these wars pull vital resources from programs of social justice and investment in our communities. Everyone deserves a decent standard of living. In the wealthiest and most powerful country on earth, it's disgraceful that 47 million people, including 16 million children, are forced to live in poverty. This is a moral stain on the United States of America, and we must bring an end to poverty. We must do that. And so, yes, we must fight for the soul of our nation. We must fight for black lives, which do matter. Okay? Peace Action has got to do that. It's peace and justice. We must fight for our young people and the undocumented immigrant community. Peace Action must do this. That's who we are. We must fight for economic equality, which is long overdue. Peace Action has got to do that and fight for an end to mass incarceration, to free our sons and daughters from oppression. We must fight for civil and human rights for everyone, including our LGBT community. Peace Action must do that. And we must fight against racism, bigotry, and discrimination wherever it rears its ugly head. That's what Peace Action must do. And yes, we must continue to fight for peace. But Dr. King told us what intersectionality was all about when he talked about these three evils, didn't he? He laid it out, so we've got to really take this and run with it now. And so the time is always right to do what is right, as Dr. King said. That's why we're here today. It's really a moment in our time where peace action again is needed now more than ever, with this un-American Trump administration trying to destroy this country. So peace action, you know what we have to do. It's now my distinct pleasure to introduce not a person who needs any introduction, but someone you know very well, who's another dear friend of mine and all of you, and who is a dear friend really of our planet. She is a warrior woman who has devoted, she's a warrior woman, really. And you know who I'm talking about. She's devoted her entire life to the anti-war movement, civil rights, and feminist movements, having served as president of the International Peace Bureau and the Hague Appeal for Peace. A woman whose life, her whole life has been about ridding the world of nuclear weapons and for peace. This is a woman who has been fighting for peace since the 60s, when she was a national leader of the Women's Strike for Peace. She was a leader in the Vietnam anti-Vietnam War movement. She organized demonstrations and rallied for peace. She's a true champion. She is a warrior woman, and I am so pleased, Cora, to see you and to be in your presence tonight. Let's greet Cora Weiss. Let's thank her for her continuing work. She's still in the struggle. She's still fighting. And Cora, I hate to say it, but your time is now, and your time has come, because young people need to know. Our young people need to learn from you. They need to know exactly what this world is really all about and what we have to do to save our planet. So thank you, Cora.
I'm exhausted. What a beautiful, beautiful room full of beautiful people. Thank you for being here. Happy anniversary, everyone. 60 years ago, SANE started with a plea to prevent nuclear war. Tonight, we must do it again. Congratulations, ICANN. In honor of the Nobel Peace Prize, let's agree to abolish nuclear bombs. And please, all you good peace and justice activists, add strict gun control to your agenda and prevent more climate change. We have murder in the streets, devastating wildfires, hurricanes, climate change, and nuclear weapons both result in the apocalypse. One does it slowly, the other in minutes. Our democracy is at stake, our future is at stake. We've got to turn things around together now. What an honor to honor Harry Belafonte. I'm sorry to say that he is very sorry that he's unable to be with us tonight. But his wonderful, wonderful daughter, Gina Belafonte, is here, and she will accept the award for him and speak for him after I introduce him. Harry and I have known each other since 1959, when we worked to airlift students from East Africa to this country for university so they could go home to be nation builders of newly independent states. Harry loved Tom Mboya, the Kenyan charismatic labor and liberation leader. He teamed up with Jackie Robinson and Sidney Poitier to write a fundraising letter, which we hoped would enable us to charter one plane for 81 students. Over 3 years, we brought nearly 800 students, among them Wangari Maathai, who became Africa's first woman Nobel Peace Laureate. We gave grants to a guy named Barack Hussein Obama Sr., a student at the University of Hawaii, and you know what he produced. Harry wrote the foreword to Airlift to America. In it, he said, "The airlift and its impact is a testament to the need for young people with courageous visions to take risks for social change, and for the rest of us to support them." He's always empowered young people. Not everyone knows that Harry Belafonte was part of the founding of SANE in 1959, the mother of peace action. In 1960, at Madison Square Garden, 20,000 people heard him call for an end to the arms race, joined by his great friend, Eleanor Roosevelt. Harry greatly admired the Roosevelts, whom he rightly called, quote, a family committed to the plight of the underclass. On January 22, 1987, Harry chaired a reception for Oliver Tambo, President of the African National Congress of South Africa, whom Barbara spoke about. He reminded us that Eleanor Roosevelt, 30 years earlier, introduced him to the American Committee on Africa, which my husband Peter served as president. He said that, quote, listen carefully, Franklin Roosevelt could have been my father because of my mother's extraordinary passion for him. The day before that, Harry was here at the Riverside Church when Oliver Tambo delivered the Olof Palme Memorial Lecture on Disarmament and Development. Olof Palme was Sweden's prime minister who, like Dr. King, Malcolm, the president, and Bobby Kennedy, was shot dead by a gun. Palme's close advisor and speechwriter, Ambassador Pierre Schori, is with us tonight. Because of Olof Palme, Sweden voted at the United Nations for the Treaty for the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, for which he was soundly criticized by the Trump administration, for which Sweden was soundly criticized. Many of Harry's actions made history. When Webb Du Bois called for outlawing atomic weapons, he was arrested and put on trial. Harry stood up, took the risk, and supported Du Bois. The charges were dropped when Albert Einstein and others joined him and protested. Harry made history again when he invited Dr. Martin Luther King to draft his speech declaring his opposition to the Vietnam War in Harry's apartment. Again, Dr. King's allies told him not to divert attention from civil rights. Harry stood up, nearly alone, and told him it was the right thing to do. Clergy and laity concerned, led by Reverend William Sloane Coffin, who would later become senior minister of this church and then leader of St. Freeze, invited Dr. King to speak here at Riverside on April 4th, 1967. Every newspaper in America, with the exception of the Louisville Courier, condemned Dr. King and his speech. Harry stood with him. 1 week later, Dr. King spoke at the UN for the spring mobilization against the war in Vietnam. He led thousands of people from around the country and the world in a march to Central Park to say out of Vietnam. Harry Belafonte's uncompromising support helped make that happen. Harry Belafonte has spent his life husbanding, parenting, grandparenting, singing, dancing, marching, speaking, fighting for justice and for peace. He gives his mother credit, saying she told him, quote, to fight. Harry Belafonte has had a global reach. His influence is extraordinary. Harry Belafonte is a moral authority in the desert of such essential people. It's a great pleasure to award Harry Belafonte the Peace Action Lifetime Achievement Award for Peace and Justice. Please meet and welcome Gina Belafonte.
Thank you. Thank you so much. There is so much to do. And that doesn't scare me. And I hope it does not scare you either. I am honored to pick this award up for my father and to read a message that he brings to you tonight. But before I do, I just want to say how critical it is for all of us to see the intersectionality and the connectedness of all of our struggles. It's war against us all, not only globally but locally. Whether it's food deserts or the militarization of our streets by our police or wherever you see injustice, it's everywhere, and we must come together in dialogue and conversation to see how we can work together and support each other in our ongoing work. From my father. When one's life has gone beyond 90 years of age, the dance with daily existence carries challenging obstacles, and some of them not so rewarding. I truly regret I am unable to be with you tonight, having great memories of when the idea of SANE was first conceived in 1957. And to have been in the service of such a cause and share the company of remarkable colleagues such as Eleanor Roosevelt, Benjamin Spock, and in later years, Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. It was a true honor. All this was done in the name of peace. We had hoped that by now our world would have gained enough experience to ensure that war would no longer be a part of the human vocabulary. Unfortunately, there are evil ones amongst us, those who still play with the extinction of life as if somehow they and only they determine when it is appropriate to dictate such a condition. America deserves better than that. If we have fallen short of the nobler goal as we have, it is up to those very same Americans to strengthen out and straighten out the mess. This is why we have all gathered here tonight, and I hope this evening is deemed successful by all those who have participated to help ensure that peace endures a little bit longer. Many thanks to Cora Weiss for having extended the invitation. I hold her friendship dear. Peace. Thank you.